Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. And in this video, I'm going to be looking at the weekend of February the 22nd and 23rd, 2025. And of course, my main topic is going to be the astrology and I Ching of the weekend. But I also want to consider the weekend's main event, which is the German elections. So German elections are on Sunday, and I thought I would talk about them, from an astrological perspective. Now, this is not a politics channel. This is an astrology channel. I don't know anything about German politics, but still, I thought I'd have a go, sort of looking at what is the astrology on Sunday. What are the planets telling us about the overall impact of these elections and some of the personalities involved? So that's something I'm going to be looking at the end of the video. But first of all, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for the weekend, which is February the 22nd and 23rd, 2025. So here is the chart for the weekend, set for midnight on Sunday, New York time, and there we have the chart. This is the middle of the weekend from a New York perspective, and the first thing we notice is that the moon is in Capricorn. So over the weekend, the moon changes sign from Sagittarius to Capricorn. In fact, this sign change takes place at 9 minutes past 11 in the evening on Saturday, London time. So on sort of Saturday late afternoon, early evening, if you're in the Americas, the moon will change sign. Will move into Capricorn. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, then the moon won't move into Capricorn until sometime in the morning on Sunday. But still, it is a weekend of transition, moving from moon in Sagittarius to moon in Capricorn. That is always a big change. The moon moving out of an earth sign into a fire sign. Moving out of a fire sign into a earth sign. So you could say that things stabilize, or maybe you might say that things get a little bit more boring. I mean, moon in Sagittarius is quite a fun place. For Sagittarius, it's all about excitement, things happening, having ideas, and having that fire so important to moon in Sagittarius, such an intrinsic part of it. The moon moves into Capricorn. We have to face reality. We have to look at our needs. We have to consider our material needs. And in some cases, we have to put ourselves first. But, there's nothing wrong with moon being in Capricorn. There are a lot of people who have moon in Capricorn, and they have fantastically successful lives and happy lives as well. So it's not a problem if you're listening to this and you've got moon in Capricorn. In fact, if you've got moon in Capricorn, you're probably going to benefit from a moon moving into your moon sign. So that's one thing going on. I mean, it's not actually a particularly frenetic weekend, at least on paper. The moon on Saturday, while it's in late Sagittarius, it does make a square to Saturn and a square to Neptune. So, moon square Saturn, moon square Neptune. Yeah, the moon might be in Sagittarius, but the moon square Saturn can slow it down, and the moon will at some stage be square the Saturn-Neptune midpoint, so there can be a bit of fear and holding back. And so Saturday may not live up to its potential. There are things we might like to do, but are we actually going to be able to see them through? And most importantly, are we actually going to enjoy them in a sort of a free-flowing kind of way? Possibly not. Then moon moves into Capricorn, and in some respects, it's quite good that the moon is moving into Capricorn. The first thing that happens when the moon moves into Capricorn is it makes a sextile to the sun. And so moon sextile sun, great aspect, not dramatic, but it's wholesome and it's harmonious. Moon in Capricorn, sun in Pisces. The great thing about sextiles compared to trines is that when you've got a trine, when you've got two planets in trine, they're in the same element, obviously. If they're exactly in trine. And they're in the same element, so they have a certain relationship to one another, on paper a harmonious relationship, but on the other hand, the relationship may be too close, it may be too flowing, it may be too easy. With a sextile, you've got two planets in the same polarity, if it's an exact sextile, in the same polarity. In other words, they're both in positive signs or both in negative signs, but there's a slight difference between them. So moon in an earth sign, Capricorn, sun in a water sign, which is Pisces. So they get on with each other without being too similar to one another, and that may be one reason why the sextile could be more fortunate for the trine. And also there's a dynamism to the sextile, a little bit of dynamism, because it is a sextile. Number 6, 2 times 3, 2 is a number of opposition, 3 is the number of ease. And with that moon sextile sun, I would have said that Sunday is going to be a relatively stable day for most of us. I'm not saying that the German elections, though, are going to be a stabilizing event, though we do have to consider that moon sextile sun on Sunday and how it impacts Germany, but that's something I'll be talking about at the end of the video. And aside from that, moon sextiles the sun, then the moon squares Venus. So moon goes on and Venus is at 9 degrees Aries. So moon square Venus, that aspect is not a particularly big deal. It's a cardinal. When you've got two cardinal signs, and when you've got two planets in square to one another, particularly if they're in some respects quite similar planets, like Moon and Venus are both sort of feminine planets and they're square. It's not about big fights and arguments really, but it could be about a feeling of disharmony, and I would say overindulgence if it wasn't for the fact that the moon was in Capricorn. But we might sort of take something too far, or emotionally we might move in the wrong direction. But I wouldn't get too worried about that moon square Venus. Then also on Sunday we have got Mercury trine Mars. So Mercury 16 midnight, 16 degrees 6 Pisces, moving to a trine of Mars at 1701 Cancer. And that might actually be quite an important aspect. So Mercury trine Mars is about words, ideas, but also about how we promote those words and ideas. And there's a certain anger to Mercury trine Mars. And we really want to express ourselves. At least some of us are going to want to express ourselves, and we could end up being, quite a heated environment. And we should not forget that Mars is stationary direct on Monday. Mars goes stationary direct. Let me actually be completely precise about it. Mars comes to a standstill at actually 2 a.m. on Monday, London time, which is 3 a.m. Berlin time. But that means that if you're in the Americas, then on Sunday evening, Mars comes to a grinding halt, and at 17 degrees 1 Cancer. Now that is something I'm going to be talking about in detail when I do the horoscopes for Monday. So I don't want to say a huge amount about Mars going stationary direct, but it's almost certainly very significant that the German elections are taking place at a time when Mars is at a standstill. And this Mars at a standstill is prominent simply by virtue of the fact that it is stationary and it is trine Mercury. There is something that needs to be said, and it could be said angrily, though Mars and Mercury are in water signs, the mute signs, because Mars is in Cancer, the sign of a crab. Mercury is in Pisces, the sign of a fish. Crabs and fishes supposedly don't make much noise, so they're mute. So some of that anger may be restrained and may be internalized, but still, it's a trine. We've got to say something, haven't we? So that's the broad picture for the weekend. I would have said that probably the most important aspect over the weekend is that Mercury trine Mars, and just looking at the weekend from a viewpoint of Sydney, Australia. So this is just a representative of Australasia, East Asia. So at midnight on Sunday, the middle of the weekend, the moon is at 24 Sagittarius, and so that is a reminder, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, that for most of the weekend the moon is actually in Sagittarius. So your experience of a weekend might be different than if you're in the Americas, particularly on Sunday. First half of Sunday, moon is in Sagittarius, and then the moon doesn't actually get into Capricorn until right at the end, or at least late morning, whatever, something around then when the moon goes into Capricorn. So there's a slightly different feel to the weekend, and if you're doing stuff on Saturday, late on Saturday, you might really feel that moon square Saturn. That could have an impact on you if you are in Australia, New Zealand. So if you're going out on Saturday night, if you're in Australasia, you shouldn't really have expectations, because what have you got to look forward to? Moon square Saturn, and moon square Neptune. It's not great, and it may just feel that there's something holding you back. But I just wanted to put up that chart just to show you there is a slight difference between the experience of Australian, if you're Australian or you're New Zealander, slightly different than if you're in the Americas. Now let me turn to the heliocentric picture of the weekend. That Venus-Mars conjunction still in operation, but it's now 4 degrees apart, so not as strong as it used to be, and Mercury has moved off the trine of the conjunction, and heliocentrically we have a Mercury Chiron conjunction, and that is quite a collective energy. Mercury conjunct Chiron conjunction, which is bound up with Jupiter. So it might be about people feeling a little bit sorry for themselves, Mercury conjunct Chiron, feeling in some way they are rejected. But on the other hand, Mercury does make a sextile to Jupiter. So in the end, people want to make an impression. Perhaps we want to make an impression, and we don't want to just keep quiet. I mean, even though the moon is in the end ends up in Capricorn this weekend, with that Mercury sextile Jupiter, there's something that has to be said, and we want to say it in such a way that people notice us. And if that means causing a fuss, so what? Some things have to be said, especially if injustice is involved, or we feel that injustice is involved. I do think that Chiron can be about justice and feeling another person's pain, that kind of injustice. And so we have Mercury conjunct Chiron, sextile Jupiter, and perhaps that heliocentric aspect is is the most important aspect of the weekend, because geocentrically there's not a great deal going on. A lot hinges on that Mercury trine Mars. So you could say that the heliocentric Mercury sextile Jupiter is kind of echoing what the geocentric Mercury trine Mars is saying, and it is about expression, feeling we do have to express ourselves. And from a heliocentric perspective, we want to express ourselves in a way that is noticeable, that causes an impact. We want to demonstrate that we're not just going to follow the crowd, that we really are individuals. And if we cause a fuss, well, so be it. So that's a heliocentric picture, and I now want to consider the weekend from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for the weekend of February the 22nd and 23rd, 2025. Aries. Aries, things are clearly changing. Mars is on the absolute verge of going stationary direct. It's been retrograde since the beginning of December, and it is now coming to a standstill. And if you're in the Americas, then Mars goes stationary direct this weekend, late on Sunday. If you are in Europe, it will take place 2 o'clock in the morning on Monday if you're in the UK, 3 o'clock in the morning on Monday if you're in Paris or Berlin or Rome. So it's here. And I would guess that you feel it, and you feel that something is changing and you want to act on it. And so there might be something about you that is ever so slightly impulsive. Maybe now is the moment. And Mercury is making a trine to Mars at the same time as Mars is going stationary direct. And so Mercury trine Mars really might be the impulse to say something, whatever it is that's on your mind. You've been bottling it up, and now's your chance. Yet I'm not convinced that you should just say the first thing that comes to mind. I think you need a certain amount of discretion, and you also need to consider your own self-interest. Just because you want to do something doesn't mean that you should do it. And also, the time of Mars going stationary direct should be a time to pause. Mars is dead still. It is the slowest planet out there. It's even slower than Pluto. You think about Pluto being a slow mover, but Mars is even slower than Pluto right now because it is still. And so, do you have to act? I don't think you do. And Mercury trine Mars could be about contemplation. It's a moment where you can actually see the truth of the matter. You can start to understand things. Perhaps understand where you went wrong in the past. You can think back maybe to some failed initiatives you took last year, and now you're a wiser person, and your actions in the future are going to be far more considered, and you're more likely to get good results. So the past is there. You can reconsider the past, and you can start to contemplate the future. But I'm just not convinced you actually have to do anything right now. And the moon is moving into Capricorn over the weekend, and that moon moving into Capricorn is quite a serious influence. It's not a bad influence, it's a serious influence, and it's quite a focused influence. It's about what you want to do, what you want to achieve. And it might be the weekend, but you're thinking ahead. and it's good that you're thinking ahead. And the moon in Capricorn, which is sextile the sun. So when the moon moves into Capricorn, could be late on Saturday if you're in the Americas, could be on Sunday if you're not. When the moon moves into Capricorn, when it makes that sextile to the sun, there's a sense of feeling that you know what you need to do, and you can just get on with it. You don't have to talk about it, and it might be a Sunday, but there are still definitely things that you can actually put into action. But you don't have to do it in a dramatic way. In fact, you should not do it in a dramatic way. You just need to get on with it and prepare the ground. So overall, it is a weekend of change. And I think in many cases, Capricorn, you're going to feel good about it. You're going to feel... Sorry, you're not a Capricorn, you're an Aries. The moon is in Capricorn. In many cases, Aries, you're going to feel good about it, and you're going to feel that there really are, possibilities in the future. But you don't have to be in a panic thinking you've got to do everything at once. Sure, Mercury is trine Mars, but use that Mercury trine Mars in the right way. You don't have to say things. You can think about things. You can study things. You can try to work things out. You can even use your feelings. I know that Aries is not a fantastically emotional sign. I mean, it's not how Aries functions. Aries functions through intuition, and there is a difference between emotion and intuition. But with that Mercury trine Mars, you can feel things, and you can feel the way things are going, especially with that Mars being stationary direct. You can feel the way things are going, and that really should put you in a good position for next week. Taurus, the moon is changing signs. It's moving out of Sagittarius and moving into Capricorn, and by and large, we can say that Saturday is a broadly Sagittarius day, and and Sunday is a broadly Capricorn day. I mean, that is a bit of a generalization. It depends where you are, but with the moon, moving through Sagittarius, it just might feel that there are things that are a little bit complicated, and you might want to keep working on them. And there's also a certain amount of wariness on Saturday. You might not be sure whether it's the right thing to do, whatever it is you're planning, or you might feel you have to hold back. And so you perhaps should, stay where you are and allow things to work their way through. And you might actually have some powerful insights with moon moving into Sagittarius. Insights where you just suddenly get it. It's not just about what things look like or what their sort of their material surface details. It's something more fundamental than that. And with the moon moving through Sagittarius, making a square to Saturn, square to Neptune, you might suddenly just get it. And that first impression of getting it may be a little bit difficult when you're confronted with the truth. I mean, the truth is never particularly easy, but once you see the truth, you can start to move on. And then the moon moves into Capricorn, and when the moon moves into Capricorn, it makes a sextile to the sun, and it will just feel that things just are a lot easier. And if you're in the Americas, you're going to feel that pretty early in the weekend. By the early evening on Saturday, you'll feel a sense that things are changing for the better. If you're in Europe or Asia, Australia, New Zealand, then that's going to be more a feeling about Sunday. But at some stage you will feel that things actually are better than expected. And by the end of the weekend, for many Taurians, there'll just be a sense of broad harmony, and you can get on well with people, and social activities, that shouldn't be a problem. Again, especially on Sunday. So if you've got social plans, then try to steer clear of Saturday, because I don't think that Saturday is going to be a particularly good day, and it may feel on Saturday that things are somewhat blocked, but on Sunday things will be moving, and it might occur to you that certain people are moving. They haven't moved for a long time. They have kept things to themselves, but things are changing, and that's connected with Mars. So Mars, ruler of Scorpio, ruler of your opposite sign, is stationary direct. It's stationary direct late on Sunday if you're in the Americas, or 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning if you're in Europe. And that may say something about another person's behavior. You can almost see that there are certain people who are slowing down, and they're almost slowing down to a halt. In fact, they are slowing down to a halt. And it's that moment where someone changes direction. So don't be surprised if certain important people in your life are in a process of that kind of change. But I think I'll probably be talking more about Mars going stationary direct and what it means when I do my forecast for Monday. So I'll be putting out those quite soon. But I don't want to sort of go on too much about it because I don't want to repeat myself. But do watch other people's behavior, because I think they are in a process of change. And additionally, Mercury is making a trine to Mars, and that Mercury trine Mars might indicate a person who has a lot to say. Now, that doesn't mean to say they're going to say it, but they will have things to say. And maybe you can create an environment where someone is able to communicate freely. Because this Mercury trine Mars, it is about ideas, but it could be about ideas that don't manifest very easily because it's in water signs, and it just needs the right environment. So that's one possibility with Mercury trine Mars. But also with Mercury trine Mars, from a social perspective, don't keep yourself to yourself, especially on Sunday. Don't forget that Venus is in mutual reception to the Sun. And so Venus mutual reception to the Sun is sociable by exaltation, and this is the first weekend where the Sun and Venus have been in mutual reception. So that may say something about your social activities and what you want to do, but as I've already suggested, I would think that your social activities are going to be more satisfying on Sunday rather than Saturday. Gemini, you may be thinking that it is time to let people know how you feel. You've got things that you're thinking about, you've been feeling them, and some things do make you rather annoyed. There's little doubt about that. And it's all because Mercury is making a trine to Mars. So Mercury, your ruler, is in Pisces, and Pisces is a sign that is really up there in the Gemini chart, very high profile. Mercury is moving through Pisces, and yes, it's making a trine to Mars. So there are certain things that you are annoyed about, or at the very least you feel passionately about them, and you just might feel that now is the time. You've got to say it, or you've got to write it. And you can be quite effective, provided you go about things in the right way. Now, this trine between Mercury and Mars is it's in water signs, and that means that the way you deliver your message should ideally have a high emotional content, or at least you should be very aware of the emotional environment in which the message is delivered, and don't underestimate how much other people can pick up. So you may not have to say as much as you thought you did, and people may get the message very quickly. You may not even have to say anything. Just by what you don't say, by your posture, your body language, you can quite possibly explain everything. And in fact, if you launch into a long speech, or you really get into the verbal side of things, and you don't know when to stop with this Mercury trine Mars, you could lose your power. So do consider how you deliver your message, and it may be more straightforward than you realize. And yeah, there's not a great deal you have to say. You don't have to go on and on. And in terms of written communications, I would have said the fewer words the better, because if you use few words, the words that matter really will stand out, and they'll get the expected, or at least the anticipated reaction, the reaction that you really hoped for. But do think about it, and think about what you're trying to say, and also consider, what matters, what really does matter. And it might well be that the financial dimension is important. It's not something you necessarily want to get your hands dirty with, and it is the weekend, but money may raise its head, especially on Sunday, when Moon moves into Capricorn and out of Sagittarius. There is a financial issue which so far has not been expressed. People haven't wanted to talk about it, but it's been there. It's always just there in the background, and someone has to talk about it, and maybe that person is you, and you're ready to talk about things that other people just are not prepared to engage with. And when we look at the heliocentric chart, we notice that Mercury is doing stuff. Heliocentrically, Mercury is making a sextile. Mercury is making a sextile to Jupiter, and it's making a conjunction to Chiron. So that heliocentric aspect, or series of aspects, could have an impact on you, Gemini. And with Mercury conjunct Chiron, you may feel that you are different at a really fundamental level. This is a heliocentric trine. It's not a geocentric trine. And you may feel that you're different, that you have a different perspective, and that you have to do something about it. And you're absolutely right to feel that you need to do something about it, especially as Mercury is making a sextile to Jupiter. It could be that you have some kind of broader idea about the way things should be, and you're informed by some sort of a higher level cosmic force which is telling you that you really have got something to do, and that you've really got something to offer. And the question is, how do you go about it? And you don't want to be different just for the sake of it. And I've already said, with this Mercury trine Mars, that you've got lots of ideas, but how you express these ideas is important. And you don't want to just be full of verbiage, just saying the first thing that comes to mind, just going on and on and on. There has to be a certain sense of discretion there. And at the same time, listening to your feelings, but still. Mercury conjunct Chiron sextile Jupiter is about you feeling that perhaps you have a sort of broader sense of purpose, a new sense of purpose. And just because you feel this doesn't mean that you have to tell everyone about it. Especially, it's a weekend, maybe people are focusing on other things. But it could be a quiet realization, Gemini, that you are different, that you have a different perspective, and that sooner or later you're going to have to make that sense of difference and uniqueness clear. But this weekend, probably not. It's just not quite the right time. Cancer. Cancer, the moon is changing sign. The moon is moving out of Sagittarius into Capricorn. And this means that I'm thinking that Sunday is probably going to be a better day than Saturday. So, Saturday you've got moon moving through Sagittarius. You just may feel that there are things you're finishing off, and you're aware of things holding you back. There may be people holding you back on Saturday and confusing you, and you're not quite sure what to do. You're not quite sure how to respond to these people, or maybe to one person, one situation. It's kind of holding you back a little, and you'd like to do things differently, but maybe you feel you can't. And so that might be how you experience moon in Sagittarius. And the last aspect the moon makes before it leaves Sagittarius is a square to Neptune. And so that square to Neptune may make you unsure of yourself, and it might also make you wonder whether you have got what it takes to really see things through. And there might be a few sort of self-doubts sort of on Saturday. I mean, it could be sort of into Sunday if you're in Australia and New Zealand, but eventually the moon moves into Capricorn. At some stage the moon moves into Capricorn, and moon moving into Capricorn does change things, and it changes things for the better. Capricorn is a cardinal sign. Things are more straightforward, and the moon, when it moves into Capricorn, makes a sextile to the sun, and that moon sextile sun on Sunday is just going to make you feel that you're back in touch with things. I mean, that moon sextile sun, by the way, if you're an American Cancerian, that moon sextile sun might actually be on Saturday. Let me just that moon sextile sun is at 8:26 in the morning London time on Sunday. No, that moon sextile sun, wherever you are, is on Sunday, unless perhaps you're in Hawaii, or Alaska maybe. But moon sextile sun on Sunday it's great. You feel at one with yourself. You feel you're doing the right thing, and that sun is in mutual reception to Venus, so it is a fortunate influence, and you're able to balance your need for inspiration and purpose with your own basic understanding of your material needs. So you can do things that are exciting, that are mind expanding, but which also don't compromise your security concerns. And moon moving into Capricorn inevitably, almost, can say something about relationships. And so in terms of a weekend, the moon, beginning of a weekend, making those squares to Saturn and Neptune, and that might make you feel that relationships were not an area that you wanted to involve yourself with. Other people might in general have seemed to be a problem. But Sunday, you see things in a different way. You start to see that not everyone is a problem, and certain people can be supportive, and they can also be interesting. You need intellectual stimulation, you need spiritual stimulation, you need to be given a new view, and certain people can provide that view if you give them a chance. And this moon sextile Sun is not just about spirituality. It can just be about purpose and what you want. And that is because the Sun is in mutual reception to Venus. And so with that Sun mutual reception to Venus, it's about having a broader view, but a broader view about what is possible and what your ambitions are. And that could be something you work out on your own. You might have a dream with that moon sextile Sun. It might be a literal dream, or it could be a daydream. Something might occur to you. It just comes from nowhere, and you just get it like you've never got it before with that moon sextile the Sun. But it is the fact that it is Sun. The fact that the Sun is in mutual reception with Venus, and of course Venus is in Aries. Venus is in a very prominent angle of your chart, and so that looks to me pretty fortunate. And so overall, Cancer, I would really recommend that you focus your energies on Sunday rather than Saturday. I'm not convinced that Saturday is going to be a particularly good day. You may not have a great deal of energy. Certain people, certain situations may be a pain. But on Sunday, when the moon moves into Capricorn, things improve. And it's not just you who improve or your luck that improves, but also other people improve. I mean, maybe they have a change of mind or a change of approach, or it just may be that on Sunday you have an opportunity to be in touch with people who just weren't available on Saturday. So that's the main thing. Get your focus right. Focus your energies on Sunday rather than the Saturday. Leo, the weekend starts with the moon in Sagittarius. And with the moon in Sagittarius, you feel that there are things you would like to finish, and you're trying to make the most of what's available, but it could be hard work. You've been trying to do something and you've been trying to get something together, but it just may not be happening. And the moon is making on Saturday. The moon is making a square to Saturn. It's making a square to Neptune, and because of that, you just might feel that you're not being particularly supported. The universe doesn't seem to be there for you, and this is a little bit frustrating because you've got all these ideas. You've got some really powerful ideas and you want to put them into practice, but you're just not getting enough support on Saturday. But things change, and what changes is the moon moving into Capricorn. The moon moves into Capricorn in the Americas. That would be late on Saturday, could be on Sunday if you're elsewhere. Now, you might think that moon moving into Capricorn, if you're a Leo, is not great. I mean, Capricorn and Leo are very different signs. But in this case, I think that moon in Capricorn works in your favour. And I think the advantage of the moon moving into Capricorn, well, firstly, the moon, when it moves into Capricorn, it makes a sextile to the Sun. The Sun is, of course, your ruler, and your Sun is pretty strong at the moment because it is in mutual reception by exaltation with Venus. But There's another factor involved with moon moving into Capricorn, and it's the fact that when the moon moves into Capricorn, you become more realistic. And perhaps part of a problem on Saturday was that you were not being realistic, and you were just thinking that things would just naturally sort themselves out. You weren't quite sure how it was going to happen, but you just assumed that everything was going to be fine, and it wasn't fine, and it's frustrating. But when the moon moves into Capricorn, things become more obvious. It's more obvious, what needs to be done. And that moon sextile sun, really useful aspect. It's a sextile. Sextile is about a challenge, but it's also about a good result. And so you are challenged to make the most of what you have, and you can do it because it is a sextile, and it's not something that is at all dramatic. The moon is in Capricorn, the sun is in Pisces. These are not dramatic signs, and so you get a sense of what you can do if you're prepared to put the effort in, and then that links with this sense of excitement that you had or you have over the weekend that can be so frustrating. You have these ideas, things you'd like to do, and on Saturday you might just think it's impossible. On Sunday you realize it's not impossible, but you also realize that it's hard work, that it's not necessarily going to be easy. So because you're able to be realistic on Sunday, you can act in a responsible way, and you can actually start to get things done. So there is a difference between Saturday and Sunday. On Saturday, you aren't realistic, but at the same time you're feeling quite frustrated. On Sunday, because you're realistic, you realize what is necessary, and as a result, you are able to make things happen. And also on Sunday, you can just be constructive, and you can sort things out. You sort out your mind. You sort out what you need. You're thinking ahead to the new week. How you're going to approach things, and you can perhaps declutter things with moon in Capricorn. And once you've cleared the decks, you're going to feel a whole lot better. Virgo, over the last couple of days, you may have felt that you didn't really want to do very much. You were wondering whether you really had what it takes, and your energy levels might have been a little sort of lower than usual. But things are changing. The moon is moving out of Sagittarius and it's moving into Capricorn. And moon moving into Capricorn, Virgo, I would have said is very much something positive. You are going to be better able to see what is possible. Last couple of days you haven't really been looking at your full potential. You've perhaps been looking down rather than looking up, and now with the moon moving into Capricorn, you start to see what's possible, and that possibility starts with yourself, and it starts with what you can do, and you just feel more positive as the moon moves into Capricorn. And the moon, when it moves into Capricorn, it makes a sextile to the sun, and that moon sextile sun seems to me a realization that you're not alone. I mean, the sun is in Pisces, it's in your opposite sign, and the sun is is well placed, it's in mutual reception with Venus. I mean, I know I go on and on ad nauseam about the sun being in mutual reception to Venus by mutual reception. I mean, I think I've got the message across now. I don't have to keep repeating myself, but I just want to make it clear to you that the sun is strongly placed, and the moon is making a sextile to the sun, and the sun is in Pisces, the sun is in your opposite sign, and that may say something about some of the people around you. You can rely on them. Some people are honourable, and if there's something you need, in most cases they'll be happy to provide it. And so in terms of relationships, Sunday could be quite a good day. Whatever that relationship is about, you and the other person can constructively engage with each other, for whatever reason. And I do think that there'll be a mutual respect, and from your point of view, you're not going to lose touch with reality. I mean, after all, the moon is in Capricorn. And looking at relationships in general, Virgo, you are to a great extent coming out of your shell, and you're able to deal with lots of different people in many different ways, and there will be a certain versatility to you. Might not be obvious at the beginning of a weekend on Saturday, but I think that versatility will be starting to make itself very clear by Sunday, and certainly into Monday. Now, probably the main aspect going on this weekend is Mercury trine Mars. And this Mercury trine Mars is kind of reflected in the heliocentric picture, because heliocentrically we've got Mercury conjunct Chiron and Mercury sextile Jupiter, and these two aspects, one geocentric, the other heliocentric, are really complementing each other and reinforcing one another. But this Mercury trine Mars geocentrically really allows you to be very communicative. That must be the case. Mercury trine Mars. You've got things to say. You know how to say them. And I think that you will find a ready audience. And this Mercury trine Mars is made extra powerful by the fact that Mars is going stationary direct. Now, Mars going stationary direct is going to impact people in different ways, and I'll be talking about Mars going stationary direct in detail when I do my horoscopes for Monday. But as far as you're concerned, I don't think the Mars going stationary direct is any problem at all. And with Mercury trine Mars, it allows you to be very energetic in terms of what you say. And you can say things which really get noticed. I mean, for the whole weekend. I mean, not just on Sunday, but I just think that Sunday's probably going to be an easier day than Saturday. I think Saturday there'll be a strong introverted streak there, especially if you're in Europe, Asia, Australia, New Zealand. If you're in Americas, things might change, early in the day, earlier in the weekend, late afternoon, late evening on Saturday. But by and large, Sunday is the day, and you will be able to get people to notice what you're saying, and notice what you're feeling. People will pay attention to you, and you might want to do things differently. Mercury is conjunct Chiron heliocentrically, and with Mercury conjunct Chiron, you realize that you see things in a different way than other people, and your view is not a standard view, and somehow you've got to explain it, because it's not just some sort of intellectual distraction. It is a view about something important, about how to be humane, how to make the world a better place, maybe even how to relieve human suffering. Mercury conjunct Chiron. Chiron, if you has a relationship to the wounded healer and all that kind of thing, and you certainly have an awareness of other people's suffering, with that Mercury conjunct Chiron, certainly a greater awareness than usual. And Mercury is sextile Jupiter. That's a very fortunate aspect. It's a heliocentric aspect, remember. So with Mercury sextile Jupiter, it's an aspect that is encouraging you to go beyond yourself. I mean, it's encouraging everyone to go beyond themselves, but you as a Virgo with Mercury as your ruler can pick up on that aspect more than other people. And so by going beyond yourself, by asking questions that other people aren't prepared to ask, you may stand out. And once people start thinking about what you're saying, they might realize that you're right. Of course, it's not just that you're right, it's that you're able to channel some universal truth through that Mercury sextile Jupiter. But that Mercury sextile Jupiter, heliocentrically, it's a fast-moving aspect. Heliocentrically, Mercury moves very quickly. It's not going to be around for very long. So it just may be, Virgo, that on Sunday you just have an opportunity to point out an important truth. Now, if you miss that opportunity, that might be it. So be sensitive and get ready for that moment. When you get that moment, don't hesitate. Libra, we have the moon starting to move into Capricorn. The moon doesn't actually move into Capricorn for most of us until Sunday, though if you're in the Americas, it will be late afternoon, early evening. And the moon in Capricorn for a Libra could actually be quite grounding. And so on Saturday you might just feel that you're spinning your wheels, you're moving from one place to another. That maybe a certain lack of satisfaction. You're wondering, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? Where is it all going? But on Sunday, maybe late on Saturday, if you're in the Americas, you start to calm down, and you feel you don't have to be in lots of different places at once. And when the moon moves into Capricorn, it makes a sextile to the sun, and that sextile to the sun is quite calming. It should be quite calming. It's about you just perhaps being on your own, or being in a secure environment, feeling that you're in control, feeling that you don't have to do things other people's way, and organizing things how you want to organize it. And in the process, having some fairly deep thoughts about the way things should be, and mentally being able to sort of tune into your power. And you do have a lot of mental power over the weekend, especially on Sunday, and you can get to grips with ideas, important ideas, and just know that these ideas are right, and you can be confident about that. And in some cases, you can talk about these ideas, but it's got to be on your terms. It's not a weekend to be out there getting lots of attention. You won't feel comfortable doing that. On Saturday, you'll feel that you're trying to get attention, but you're being held up. People aren't listening. Then on Sunday, you won't be bothered. You'll realize that maybe what's happening out there just doesn't really matter. But still, if people want to listen to you, and you don't have to go out of your way to get people to listen to you. If people want to listen to you on Sunday, you can come over as being quite a powerful person, but powerful in a very quiet and considered way. It doesn't need any advertising leaflets. Your power, it's just there. And if other people want to be part of it, they can be. But if it's too much for them, well, that's just the way it is. And another thing going on this weekend is we've got Mercury trine Mars. Mars is coming to a standstill. Mars goes stationary direct. Well, could be on Sunday evening if you're in the Americas. Otherwise, it will be on Monday. And so with Mars going stationary direct, it's a time when you are thinking about some of your ambitions, and this relates back to what I was saying, that you have powerful thoughts. These powerful thoughts are coming thick and fast, and a lot of these powerful thoughts do relate to how you perceive your future, potentially in quite a material way. I mean, don't forget the moon is moving into Capricorn, and Capricorn is quite a material place for the moon. I mean, some would say overly material, but sometimes it just has to be. And so your ideas about your future are changing, becoming more intense. And again, Mars going stationary direct, and then Mercury is making a trine to Mars. So this trine between Mercury and Mars, which in many respects is the most important aspect of the weekend, this Mercury trine Mars is possibly about activity on your part. You are active, but you're active in a very controlled setting, and so on Saturday there's a lot of pointless activity. There could be a lot of pointless activity, but on Sunday with this Mercury trine Mars, whatever you're doing, it has a purpose, it has a reason, and you've got an idea about where it's all going. Other people, even your family, might not understand where it's going, but you understand where it's going. And so Mercury trine Mars can act quickly and precisely in terms of moving towards a particular destination. And it's not really something that has to be explained. I mean, if you are asked to explain what you're doing, you'll be able to explain yourself very, very powerfully, and I think people will just get it. So, that's a picture for the weekend. I think that overall Sunday looks like being a much better day than Saturday. Scorpio. Mars has now pretty much come to a standstill. It comes to a standstill at 2 o'clock in the morning London time on Monday, which is 6 o'clock in the evening on Sunday if you're in Los Angeles, or that would be 9 o'clock in the evening if you're in New York. So if you're in the Americas, then right at the end of a weekend, Mars comes to a standstill. If you're not in the Americas, then on Monday it will happen. But it's pretty much here. Mars is not moving now. It is pretty much still. And so as a Scorpio, that is likely to have an influence on you. And you could say, Scorpio, that this is a time where you don't really want to be disturbed. Enjoy the moment. It's not just Mars coming to a standstill, but it's you coming to a standstill. And I mean you coming to a standstill in a positive sense. It's a very refreshing experience. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to think about the future. You don't have to, well, you can think about the past, but you don't have to worry about the past. In fact, it might be the intersection between the past and the future, and you're just very much into the present and into the moment, because Mars is in this sort of standstill position, and you might not be in the mood for worrying about the usual concerns, and you might be impatient of people who try to bother you or try to talk about stuff that you're just not interested in. And this impatience may be reflected by the fact that we have this weekend a trine aspect between Mercury and Mars. So Mars is you, Mercury is the communication planet. It's making a trine. You could just be thinking about stuff, Mercury trine Mars. It's just your ideas, because Mercury is about just ideas and thinking. But alternatively, Mercury trine Mars can be about how you are communicating. And Mercury trine Mars does indicate violent communication, strong communication. What you say carries a lot of weight, and you're able to give it a lot of power. And it's not just what you say, it's what you write. Everything you communicate, whether it's written or the spoken word, just has a lot of power. And it may even be your emotional messages, the messages you give out in that Scorpio way, that they may be silent, but you are giving out a lot of information by what you don't say, by your body language, by just who you are, by your presence, or even by your lack of presence, by not turning up somewhere. You're making a statement. If you've been invited to do something, but you turn that invitation down, or you decide you're not going to give any warning, you just don't turn up. Whatever you do carries a message. And don't underestimate the importance of psychological determination. Psychological determination, I think that's the phrase. So everything we do, if you take a sort of Freudian approach, is going to be impacted by our unconscious. If you, I don't know, if you, for example, I remember when I was in therapy a very long time ago, my therapist, he was a German Scorpio, and it was right at the end, and I think I was annoyed with him at some time, and I just walked out without, and I didn't want to pay him, and I would pay him at the end, and for that reason I just had forgotten to pay him. But of course, from a perspective of psychological determination, there's no such thing as forgetting things, and everything is caused by one's psychology. So whatever you do, you decide not to pay someone, or you decide to do something apparently very innocent, that everything means something. And okay, one could overinterpret things, but I think this weekend, Scorpio, everything does mean something. And so everything you do has a meaning. And that's perhaps how you're communicating with this Mercury trine Mars, remembering that this Mercury trine Mars is in water signs. It's in the mute signs. Mercury in Pisces, Mars in Cancer. So everything has a meaning, and you don't have to say anything. It's still clear. And that is one way of looking at Mercury trine Mars, but maybe I'm exaggerating with this. I think if you want to say something, you can say it very well. And ideally with this Mercury trine Mars, you should be using it to explore. Yes, it is a moment of silence. It is a moment of quiet, as Mars is going stationary direct. But still, you want to remember what you're experiencing. And you want to be elevated by what you're experiencing. And maybe Mercury trine Mars, you want to write notes. You don't want to forget. I mean, I know Scorpios tend not to forget things, but if something really occurs to you that is important and is significant, then don't be afraid to write it down, or rather, don't be too lazy. Write it down if necessary. And overall, I think that this Mercury Mars trine, it also does link to your sign, because you've got Mercury in Pisces, Mars in Cancer, and what the other water sign is, of course, Scorpio. So that Mercury-Mars trine is really, it's giving you a lot of information about who you are, what's available, what you can do, and things really are flowing, and information does matter. Get all the information you can, but without making an effort to get that information. It just has to be easy, and you can bring things together, and it's all part of this Mars stationary direct phase of your life where you can reconsider and if necessary realign yourself. Sagittarius, so on Saturday we've got the moon moving through your sign, and normally one is quite positive about the moon moving through your sign. I mean, that's good, isn't it? I mean, the moon is in a fire sign, and you feel that you're in the right place. You're aligned with your environment, but certain things are maybe getting you down a bit. I mean, I'm not talking about depression or anything like that, but it's a fact that the moon in Sagittarius is making a square to Saturn, and then it makes a square to Neptune, and this is on Saturday. Okay, it could be into Sunday if you're in Australia or New Zealand, but it's just a feeling that some things are hard work, and it could be your family. I mean, Saturn in Pisces, square Moon in Sagittarius. Your family may be pressurizing you. Saturday, it is the weekend. People do see more of their families on Saturdays and Sundays and other days of the week. So that might be what it's about. And then the moon makes a square to Neptune, and so there's an uncertainty there. You're not quite sure where you are, who you are even, and then the moon is on Saturn, squaring a Saturn-Neptune midpoint. Again, that is more uncertainty and just feeling that there's nothing that you can quite do. And I absolutely don't want to exaggerate this, because we're talking about lunar aspects, and lunar aspects are very quick. But what I'm really trying to say is that I'm not convinced that Saturday is going to be a particularly good day. I suspect that Sunday is going to be a better day. But even then, things are slow. Slower than you'd like. If you take things at face value. This needn't be the case, by the way. There is a positive message in the end, but things could be slow. Just everything's slow. It's just the pain of the material world. It's just not going as fast as you are, and there could be some frustration there. Then Sunday, moon moves out of Sagittarius. Now, that might sound disappointing for the moon to move out of Sagittarius, but in fact, moon moving out of Sagittarius into Capricorn, I think that's a good thing under the circumstances. Moon in Capricorn is a fresh start, and from a material sense, I think you're going to be more aligned with what is happening and what the demands are and what you have to do. It may not be especially interesting. Now, I must say, this is just the first level of what I'm going to say. There is a second level, which I'm just about to come on to, but it just will be more satisfying on Sunday, because you'll know what's required of you. You might understand your limitations, but you'll see what's possible. And moon in Capricorn sextiles the sun in Pisces. Again, not a particularly interesting aspect, but a useful aspect. And it may be that as the weekend progresses, you feel a greater sense of stability, and it might also be the case that certain financial things that have been bothering you can be sorted out, and what you thought was a problem a few days ago isn't actually a problem, and what helps is the fact that you're able to address things in a more constructive way. So that's one way of looking at the weekend. Not necessarily a particularly interesting weekend, but it does seem that Sunday is kind of easier than Saturday. But again, I wouldn't have expected fireworks on Sunday. But there is another way of looking at things, a rather different way of looking at things. And when I do these forecasts, I look at the geocentric chart and I also look at the heliocentric chart. And I suspect when you're looking at the heliocentric chart, you're dealing with energies that we often aren't able to get in touch with, but we can get in touch with them. And if we look at the heliocentric chart, what we see is Mercury making a conjunction to Chiron, and we also see Mercury making a sextile to Jupiter. In other words, Mercury making a sextile to your ruler. And those aspects tend to be more collective than personal. And that might mean, Sagittarius, that you don't have access to them, that you just are just caught up in your everyday life and you just can't tune into them. But what if you try? What if you make the effort to tune into this? Think about it. Mercury is sextile Jupiter. You need to find that aspect in your life. And it seems that the universe is open for communication if you can align yourself with it. And that is something you can do. There's one thing, Sagittarius, that could really work well for you. And the reason it will work well for you is not necessarily because of what you do, because of who you are, but just your ability to tune into something else. So it will not be your talent, your creativity. It will be the talent and the creativity of the universe. And you can tune into it. There is a way. Mercury sextile Jupiter is providing a pathway for that to happen. And Chiron has been sextile Jupiter heliocentrically for some time. Mercury is picking up on that aspect as well. And so really see what you can do, see what you can pick up. And if you get it right, if you completely align yourself with that energy, maybe you can use the symbolism. Chiron is about Chiron conjunct Mercury sextile Jupiter. It's about doing things differently. It's also about having compassion, and it's perhaps like going slightly out of your way. You see that someone is in trouble, or someone needs your help, and the universe, or rather they need the universe's help, but you can be the intermediary. So maybe you can do something like that. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I think there is a possibility to have a great weekend, Sagittarius, but you have to be aware of these very high-level aspects which normally aren't fully available to us. Capricorn. Moon is moving into your sign this weekend. Could be on Saturday evening, even Saturday afternoon if you're late Saturday afternoon if you're in the Americas. If you're not in the Americas, then that will happen on Sunday. But Moon moving into your sign is good news, and with the Moon moving into your sign, it's also going to be sextile the Sun, and you're going to just feel in the center of things again. And over the last couple of days you might have felt a certain lack of alignment. There were things happening, but you weren't fully in tune with it all, and you perhaps you just wanted not to be involved. But with the Moon moving into Capricorn, you start to get things again, and things are becoming clear, and you have a broad sense of purpose, and also it's relatively easy for you to get your message across. Moon sextile Sun, and Moon sextile Sun, you've got things to say, and I think that in most cases, Capricorn, people will listen to you, and so don't be afraid to to say what's on your mind. Especially on Sunday. I don't think that Saturday is going to be an especially good day. Particularly on Saturday, we've got Moon square Saturn, and Moon square Saturn might be about someone causing problems, someone not apparently being particularly sympathetic to your needs. You can't really rely on people too much on Saturday, and they might not give you what you want. But on Sunday, things change, and you're far more in control, and it's your time almost with the Moon in Capricorn. And on Sunday, if you want to go somewhere, if you feel that there's somewhere you need to visit, Sunday might be the time to do it. So if you've got a choice about doing something, do you do it on Saturday, or do you do it on Sunday? I would suggest you do it on Sunday rather than Saturday, because I think Saturday could be a somewhat disappointing day. And I'm not singling you out, by the way. I've been going through the signs, and I've kind of emphasized that I really think that Saturday is not a particularly good day for any of us, again, regardless of our sign. But for you in particular, with the Moon in Capricorn on Sunday, it is your day, and it is a day when when things are starting to move. And also on Sunday we have a trine aspect between Mercury and Mars, and this Mercury-Mars trine is quite verbal, and you know what to say, and you know how to say it, and you're able to communicate with great subtlety. We've got Mercury, Mercury in Pisces, trine Mars in Cancer. Cancer is in your opposite sign, so with Mars in Cancer, that is about other people and how you relate to other people, and you can relate in a way that is forceful without being over assertive. You say what you need to say. You know how to say it, but you also recognize that you don't have to go too far. You say what you need to say, and I think in most cases your message will be understood. People will get it. People will get what you are all about. And there is a square between Moon and Venus, and this Moon Venus square is on Sunday. It could be late on Sunday, and the Moon square Venus might be about your home, it might be about your family, and it could be a stabilizing influence, this Moon square Venus, provided people do things your way. But if people don't do things your way, there could be a certain disagreement late on Sunday in a domestic setting. It's not a violent disagreement or anything like that, and in the end you'll be able to resolve it in a way that is satisfactory. But still, you can't expect everyone to be on the same wavelength, and this gathers strength over the weekend as the Moon makes this square to Venus. And it's not going to spoil your weekend or anything like that, but I think it's just something that you probably have to be aware of. And finally, I wanted to repeat what I said, I think I said it yesterday, is that Saturn is square the Mars-Uranus midpoint. And Saturn is, of course, your ruler. And so with Saturn square the Mars-Uranus midpoint, we do see the Mars-Uranus midpoint as being a little bit dangerous, a little bit accident-prone. And if you overdo it, you could you could do yourself some kind of injury, as I think I said yesterday. So remain cautious with this Saturn square Mars Uranus midpoint. And this midpoint Saturn square Mars Uranus, I don't want to keep repeating it, going on and on about it day in day out. This is a problem about doing these daily horoscopes, is that some things just continue day after day. They don't just go away. But at the same time, I don't want to just keep saying the same thing. But what I kind of wanted to say is just, over the next week maybe, just bear in mind Saturn is square the Mars Uranus midpoint, and because it stays around because Mars is stationary direct, and so don't overdo it. And in terms of other people, you're very good at the moment about defending your corner. I mean, that's something you can do, but don't be over defensive with Saturn square the Mars Uranus midpoint, because I just think that it is possible, and that would spoil things. But I have to say that just as a warning, I think it very, very likely that Saturn square the Mars Uranus midpoint is not going to manifest. So don't worry about it too much. But I thought I just had to show an abundance of caution and just let you know that aspect is around. Aquarius. We know that this weekend Mars is really coming to a standstill. In fact, if you're in the Americas, Mars is stationary direct on Sunday evening. It'll be stationary direct on Monday if you're not in the Americas. So that is happening, and this could have some impact on you. It may already be having some impact on you, and you may be thinking about how best to look after yourself, and what needs to be done to protect yourself from sort of outside disruptive forces. I'm not talking about forces that are literally dangerous necessarily, but just disruption, things that are trying to sort of undermine you a little, not deliberately undermine you, they just do undermine you. And this may be a theme with Mars being stationary direct, and I'll be talking about Mars stationary direct in more detail on Monday. But the thing about Mars stationary direct is that Mercury is making a trine to Mars, and with this Mercury trine Mars, it could be that over the weekend you start to see that there are ways in which you can safeguard yourself in many different ways. And when you look at your vulnerabilities, I suppose you can categorize them, and there might be financial vulnerabilities, for example, and this Mercury trine Mars might actually make you aware of these financial vulnerabilities, but at the same time it will make you aware of possibilities for dealing with the issue and safeguarding yourself and making sure that you can't be damaged by random events or people's carelessness or irresponsibility. So that may be one way in which you can use that Mercury trine Mars, and it's really going to be given extra power by the fact that Mars is stationary direct. So that's a kind of a negative way of looking at the Mercury trine Mars. Is there a positive way of looking at it? Well, I think there actually is. That Mercury trine Mars can be about you thinking about your interests and how to promote your interests, and that might be about money, but it can also be about career or business. And there's something you can do, there's something you can prepare, and Aquarius, you can do it in a way that doesn't get a lot of attention. I mean, you don't need that attention at the moment. It's not that kind of weekend. especially on Sunday. Okay, on Saturday the moon is moving through Sagittarius, and so with the moon moving through Sagittarius, you might feel that you can be sociable, that you can be with people, you can see what other people are doing. But to be honest, I'm not sure if it's worth the effort. People promise much but deliver little, and that's especially the case when we've got the moon in Sagittarius. Yeah, it's in Sagittarius, but it's making a square to Saturn, it's making a square to Neptune, and that could be about being disappointed and just feeling that other people just aren't up to it. And then as you move into Sunday, things slow down, or things should slow down, and you really are not even prepared to give people the benefit of the doubt. Why should you? You've got your own things to do, and in your own way, you can feel comfortable and supported, and you don't have to be in a hurry, and you can just play it safe. And playing it safe is important. And I just want to reinforce something I said yesterday when I was talking to Capricorn about it as well, is that what I was saying to Capricorn was that there is this aspect, this midpoint aspect, Saturn square the Mars-Uranus midpoint, and Saturn is your ruler. Of course, it's also Capricorn's ruler, but with Saturn square the Mars-Uranus midpoint, it can make you somewhat accident prone. As again, I know I said that yesterday, but I feel I have to repeat the point. And this Saturn on the Mars-Uranus midpoint, this aspect does hang around for a few days. I mean, maybe the next week. So, that is another reason not to go out of your way to do anything. If you go out on a limb, you could expose yourself to damage. Could be physical damage. It could be arguments, something like that. So you don't have to be experimental or do anything that you've never done before. It's absolutely unnecessary, Aquarius, at the moment. And so my overall message is just don't feel you have to do anything. Especially on Sunday. Okay, you might feel there's pressure to do something on Saturday, but it's just not going to be worth the effort. And really, Aquarius, that's all there is to be said. Pisces, it is important that this weekend you don't have expectations, because there is a possibility that you could get really quite frustrated. There are things you want to happen, but it's just not happening. And a lot of it is connected with other people and their attitude. They're just not in the mood for movement. They want to keep things as they are. And they know at some stage they have to move on. They know they have to embrace the future, but they don't want to do it. And they won't be told. And so, you can tell them what you want as much as you like, but really, are they going to listen to you? And that really might be a theme for the weekend. Especially on Saturday. I think Sunday things are possibly a bit easier because the moon is making a sextile to the sun, and that moon sextile the sun is very relevant to you, because obviously the sun is in Pisces, the sun is in your sign, and the sun is strong because it's in mutual reception by exaltation with Venus. So as the moon moves through Capricorn, sextiling the sun, then you might feel that there's a little bit of movement, but still you are faced with other people's stubbornness. They don't want to move. They certainly don't want to move as fast as you do, and you do need to respect that. There may be a number of reasons for this. I mean, we shouldn't forget also that Mars is stationary direct. It's about to come to a standstill. If you're in the Americas, then this evening Mars is stationary direct. It will be stationary direct tomorrow if you're not in the Americas. So that may be part of what's going on. But if we look at things at a higher level, Pisces, then, well, that's a heliocentric chart. The heliocentric chart is perhaps telling us something different. Now, heliocentrically, we do have a sextile between Mercury and Jupiter. And that Mercury-Jupiter sextile, which is tied up with Chiron, because Mercury is conjunct Chiron, Chiron is still sextile Jupiter. So that Mercury sextile Jupiter may indicate your ability to get in touch with something quite cosmic, and which, if you look at the material world, it may feel that it's completely not appropriate. You know, the material world is slow, and the cosmos is moving much faster than what's happening down here. And the question is, Pisces, can you get in touch with it? And I would have thought with Mercury sextile Jupiter, you can. Mercury is the messenger, and the messenger is trying to tell you something, and maybe that message has to do with Chiron. And what perhaps the message is that you have to ignore the inertia of other people. Other people will do things at their own pace, but you needn't worry about them. You can act in a way that is dynamic and is timely. And by timely, I mean it is in touch with the way the universe and the cosmos is at this moment. And if you can understand that, and as a Pisces, you should be able to do it. You know, use your feelings to tune into it. If you can understand what the universe is trying to tell you to do, then there's no need to be frustrated. There's no need to be annoyed by other people's inertia. You are not responsible for what other people do and don't do. Other people's should have no impact on your happiness or lack of it. And there is definitely a pathway for action here, but you have to be able to tune into a rather cosmic kind of energy, and you do things in your own way, and it doesn't matter if no one notices you. I should also say that Mercury is trine Mars, and that Mercury trine Mars is kind of supportive of the Mercury sextile Chiron. So Mercury trine Mars, again, I would see it as something very individual that is not dependent on other people's behavior or what other people want. You are not at the beck and call of other people. It certainly shouldn't be right now. And Mercury trine Mars is about you putting energy into something that is important to you. It's not important to anyone else. Well, it might be, but who cares? You do something that's important to you, that is a fundamental part of your self-expression, and you just do it. And if you can do that, then I think that you'll be very happy with the way things are going, and there'll be a sense of momentum, and that momentum will be emotional to begin with. As your emotions start to engage with what's happening and you just realize that you can do something really well, and also with that Mercury sextile Jupiter heliocentrically, you're going to be supported by the cosmos. And that's it. Those are my forecasts for the 12 signs, and I now want to look at the weekend from the viewpoint of the I Ching. And I asked the question, what is the weekend going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 10, treading. Treading represents a situation where we have to be careful, because if we're not careful, we could tread on the tail of the tiger. and if we tread on the tail of a tiger, we might get bitten. But the I Ching, at least the Wilhelm translation of the I Ching, seems to indicate that the tiger is not particularly bothered. Even if we tread on the tiger's tail, even if a tiger bites us, it's not necessarily the end of the world. And so we just have to be careful how we go, but we shouldn't be overly cautious. Just because there's a tiger in our path doesn't mean we should turn and run. I mean, okay, literally, if there's a tiger in your path, then of course you've got to be really careful. But if there's a metaphorical tiger in your path, then you've got to tread around it and just be really careful how you do things. And this may reflect part of what I was saying when I was looking at the 12 signs. When I was looking at the 12 signs, I was really thinking that Saturday didn't look like being a particularly good day for most of us, and there were some things to worry about. The moon was square Saturn, the moon was square Neptune, and there was a lot of fear there, and that might be reflected also in this hexagram of treading. And we do have two moving lines, and the second line moves and the sixth line moves, and the second line is about just doing things on our own. We don't actually have to get other people's help and support. It's not important, and we ideally should be quite disengaged with this. And so whatever we're doing, however we're dealing with the tiger, we do it in our own way, and we're not advertising what we're doing, and we have to follow things according to our own rules. And if we do it our own way and we don't trust other people to give us guidance, because we're the only person that understands the situation, and if we go about it like that, then it does seem that we're okay. And then the top line moves, and the top line is about, on one hand, being very careful, watching where we step. Every step matters. But also, we look back and we see our steps from the past. So, I don't know if it's snowing. Of course, the snow's all melted here. But if you look back and you can see your footsteps, and you can see what you've done in the past. And I was looking at the Wkd translation of the I Ching, and it was talking about the top line. I think it was the top line. Yeah, it was talking about the top line. And it said that this top line, there was a certain truism in the terms of this advice. And the truism is this, is that if we've done things well, we're going to get good results. And if we've done things badly, we're going to get bad results. So we look back at what we've done in the past, how we've addressed something. If we've done a good job, it will be fine. If we've done a bad job, it's not going to be fine. And this might also link with the fact that Mars is going stationary direct. Mars, we perhaps look back at what we did, what we've been doing since, was it December the 6th of last year, sometime around there, when Mars went stationary, when Mars went retrograde. But now we're looking back at the last couple of months and we're seeing, well, how did we do? Did we take the right actions? Did we not take the right actions? So this top line is a bit of a retrospective. When we look at how we've already trod, we're looking back at our footsteps, and we start to appreciate the results, whether or not it's worked. So that's one way in which it could be working. And then because we've got two moving lines, we move to a second hexagram, and we move to hexagram number 17, which is not a bad hexagram. And it would appear that having done the preparation, having carefully maneuvered ourselves into the right position, having not been bitten by the tiger, or even if we have been bitten by the tiger, not being badly bitten, we move into a position where we are in a position to be taken seriously. People are going to listen to us because we've got something to offer. And the reason we've got something to offer is because we understand our audience, and we're following. There's this advice that you can't follow. You can't be a leader if you're not prepared to follow. And leading and following are not diametrically opposed. They're part of the same thing. And we understand the people around us, and we understand what they want. And if we're telling anyone what to do, we're not going to just do it in a completely egotistical way. We're going to do it in a way that is sensitive to other people's personalities. And following can also be about the search for something. We are looking for something. We believe there's something we need to find. And if we can find it, we are going to really be able to benefit. We may be able to impress someone important if we can find something. So what is it that needs to be found? Maybe that's a question on Sunday, because if the second hexagram is, if we take the first hexagram as being more about Saturday, the second hexagram being more about Sunday, maybe indeed on Sunday, maybe there's something lost. You need to find it. And someone will be very pleased if you were to find it. Maybe you need to find it for yourself, and you'll be very happy if you can find it. But if you find yourself looking for something on Sunday, I think there's an excellent chance that you can actually get hold of it. And that's I Ching. And now I want to turn to Germany. And there is an election this weekend, and in Germany it's on Sunday. So I thought I would look at this election. I mean, I have looked at it before, but as it's so immediate, I thought I'd try to say something about it. I don't know anything about German politics. I don't speak German. I haven't really been to Germany. I passed through, but I don't really know much about Germany. But still, I'll give it a go. So if you're German, forgive me. I'm just going to try and stick to the astrology. So these elections on Sunday, as I understand it, the polls open at 8 in the morning and they close at 6 in the evening. I mean, I checked that on the internet. I looked a couple of sites and that's what I was told. Maybe I've got this wrong. And I would have said that the opening is possibly more important than the closing. Well, we shouldn't forget the chart of the closing. But so here's a chart for the opening of the German election. I've said it for Berlin. I think that seems to be reasonable because Berlin is the capital of Germany, and what stands out about this chart is the moon. Moon is in Capricorn, on the midheaven. The moon is the people, the people having their say, and it's moon in Capricorn, and that's a very sensible place for the moon in Capricorn. Now the moon is making a sextile to the sun. Now, I kind of like to look at all the potential for things to go wrong and for things to be disastrous and all of this. I mean, that's just my distorted view of the world. But moon is sextile the sun. Moon sextile sun is a fortunate aspect. It's a stable aspect. It's moon in Capricorn, sun in Pisces. It's good to start a venture with moon sextile sun, whatever that venture is. So there may be other bad things going on in this chart, but you do have to look at the moon when you're choosing a time to do something. So moon sextile sun, why not? Moon sextile sun might indicate that things can actually run smoothly. I mean, that doesn't guarantee a result, but from a bureaucratic and administrative point of view, to have an election when the moon is sextile the sun would seem to be absolutely correct. Now, we do know that Mars goes stationary direct at 3 o'clock in the morning Berlin time on Monday. So this election is taking place a few hours, less than a day before Mars goes stationary direct. Now, that strikes me as being significant. It's still retrograde technically when this election happens, and with Mars still retrograde, one does wonder whether this election is going to resolve anything. Now, there's probably no point in me really trying to make any predictions about this election, because we already know what the result is going to be, probably. We know that the Christian Democrats, or the Friedrich Merz's party is likely to get the most votes. We know that the right-wing party, the AfD, is going to do reasonably well, but we also know that the AfD is going to be frozen out of government because they are seen as being beyond the pale. And so we know there's going to be some kind of coalition. At least that's my reading of it, not with astrology, just reading the news. And so on the surface, there's not much to be said about this election astrologically. There's nothing especially dramatic that is likely to happen in terms of the results, because we have opinion polls, and it's unlikely that those opinion polls are going to be too far wrong. I mean, there are some questions. I mean, there's that small party, the Sarah Wagenknecht's party. Will she get 5%? Will she be able to get into Parliament? Because there's this 5% threshold. If you don't get 5%, you don't get representation in Parliament. That's a German system. So that's the astrology of the elections, and it on the surface it doesn't really say very much, but I think we have to look at some other charts to sort of get some kind of background on this. And there are three charts that you might want to look at in terms of preparation are these big event charts. So this chart, this election is taking place, February 23rd. So the previous solstice or equinox chart. So we can look at the previous solstice. So we had the winter solstice 2024. That's a chart we should be looking at. We might want to look at the halfway point between the solstice and the equinox, which happened at the beginning of February. We might also want to look at the full moon preceding the election. So if we look at the solstice chart before the election, so this is set for December the 21st, 2024. So this election is the first big event after the solstice. Although I would have said that you could say J.D. Vance's speech at the Munich Security Conference has changed a lot in terms of German and European relations with the United States. But the solstice chart set for December is, I've said it for Berlin, the capital of Germany, set for Berlin, has Mars on the descendant. Now, that Mars on the descendant is not just about what was happening around the time of the solstice. You could argue that solstice chart is in operation until the equinox on sort of March 20th, March 21st. So that might describe the following 3 months. And so Mars on the descendant is indicating that this is quite an angry time, and an election is a time for anger to come out, to be revealed. And Mercury is also on the midheaven, and so something is becoming clear. There's a real Mercury-Mars feel to it, and there's a Mercury-Mars trine at the time of the solstice, and of course we've got a Mercury-Mars trine, an exact Mercury-Mars trine on the day of the election. So there's a real Mercury-Mars feel to this election, and because it links with the solstice. So you might sound, oh, Mercury-Mars is very nice, it's a trine, people can say what's on their mind, but people can get angry and people can use words in a very sort of destructive way. Also, in terms of the solstice, we've got Pluto rising. Pluto's on the ascendant. So even though the positions of the planets at the time of the election may not seem overly dramatic, the solstice chart does indicate that this is a difficult time for Germany, and that Mars on the ascendant, of course, represents Germany's enemies, or countries that Germany have declared to be its enemies, whether that's Russia, and of course now it seems maybe even the United States. And so that could be, say, something about isolation in Germany from people. In America thought it was an ally, and they might feel that J.D. Vance, with his speech at the Munich Security Conference, is really messing things up for them. But so that's the solstice, and then we have the demi-solstice. Well, not the demi-solstice, the halfway point, and so this is set for February the 3rd, 2025. So this is when the sun is at exactly 15 degrees Aquarius, halfway between the solstice and the equinox. And so logically, you just look at the chart, you set the chart up, and that might give you a more detailed view about what is happening. And Mars is quite close to the ascendant, but we have Venus on the midheaven. And Venus on Skeet, conjunct the North Node, conjunct Neptune on the midheaven, pretty exactly having that Venus on the midheaven. And we need to think about what that Venus on the midheaven means. And it may say something about the election and prominence. And of course, Venus is about women. Prominent females in Germany. It could be about women's issues in Germany as well. But the prominence of Venus at the time of the halfway point between the equinox and the solstice is something we need to take note of. And then we can go really close in and look at the full moon just before the election. So that is a technique, and so let's look at the full moon before the election. So there was a full moon on February the 12th, and so just remind ourselves of the election. So there's a new moon on February the 28th. There was a full moon on February the 12th. So we're looking back at the election just before the. So we're looking at the lunation just before the election, and notice that Pluto is again set for Berlin. Pluto is on the 7th house cusp. So Pluto 7th house cusp. Paranoia about enemies, the country's enemies. Who are the country's enemies? Of course, if you're J.D. Vance, you would say that Germany's enemies are the enemies from within. And with Pluto on the 7th house cusp, there's a lot of projection, and maybe this is what Germany is doing. It's seeing all these enemies from outside, in particular Russia. But maybe, as J.D. Vance pointed out, Germany's real enemies are from within. Whether it's excessive migration, whether it's politicians restricting people's freedoms, and there is this sort of projection idea that Germany is so obsessed with fighting back against totalitarianism. We can't go back to the Nazis. We can't do this, but they're so obsessed about doing it that at an unconscious process that they're also almost creating what they're trying to avoid. Almost. I mean, I know one can exaggerate that, but additionally, with this chart, we have Venus on the midheaven. So remember, with the solstice, equinox, halfway point, we had Venus on the midheaven. We've also got Venus on the midheaven. This Venus on the midheaven is, I would have said, quite an interesting theme. And so what actually does that mean? So going back to just one point about the election, the opening of the federal elections. So assuming that the polls open at 8 o'clock in the morning, we have got 1 degree Capricorn on the midheaven, and we've got Moon on the midheaven. So Moon, you could see as a female planet. So there's this female aspect to these elections, which seems to come up again and again and again. And with the midheaven apparently at 1 Capricorn in Berlin when polls open. Now there are female candidates and there are female party leaders. One female party leader who I don't have times of birth for these people. So I mean, it really is kind of annoying. But before I look at the female party leaders, maybe we should look at the chart of one leader who I do know his time of birth, and that's Olaf Scholz. Now there is a view that you should never vote in there is an argument for voting for Olaf Scholz and his party. Now the argument is very simple, is that you should never ever vote for a candidate if you don't know their time of birth, because you just don't know what you're dealing with. At least with Olaf Scholz, we know his time of birth. And so perhaps if you're German and you vote on the basis of knowledge, you should vote for Olaf Scholz, simply because we know his time of birth. But anyway, I'm being flippant. Here is Olaf Scholz's chart. And what people are saying is that Olaf Scholz is no longer going to be Chancellor because the Socialists, the SPD are not going to do very well, and the AFD are going to do better for them, and so someone else is going to become Chancellor. So it could be a difficult time for him, Olaf Scholz. And Olaf Scholz's ascendant is at 2111 Libra. So if you look at what Olaf Scholz is experiencing at the time of the election, he might have Chiron issues, because Chiron is at 2021 Aries. Chiron is on his descendant, and in fact has a Chiron Black Moon Lilith opposition. So with Chiron on his descendant, it may feel for him to be a time of sadness and rejection, a wound from the outside. And so that Chiron may in a way sort of indicate maybe the end of something for him, but it's not a particularly happy transit. And yeah, he's got true Black Moon Lilith crossing his ascendant, and overall for him it has been a very troubling time, because he has got his moon at 21 Taurus, and Uranus has been recently conjunct his moon. So it is difficult for Olaf Scholz. And I mean, again, there's no point in making any astrological prediction, because it seems that the polls are pretty clear about how it's going to be working out. So that's Olaf Scholz. And the man who everyone says is going to be the new chancellor is Friedrich Merz. Again, Friedrich Merz, I don't have his time of birth, so it's kind of frustrating. And he is, so his party, the Christian, the Christian Democrats, or I forget which of the I'm not going to try. The sort of standard traditional right-wing party. So we don't have a time for him. So it is kind of difficult to say. He has his Saturn at 23 Scorpio. So he has had Uranus opposition his Saturn recently. And so that has been sort of chewing him up, causing him a lot of angst. And of course, he was trying to curry favour with German voters by having this vote to restrict migration, but he got the support of the AfD, but other parties sort of sabotaged it, I think. I mean, I don't know the details. I don't know much about anything about German politics. But so that's him. So he's still under the influence of Saturn opposition, of Uranus opposition his Saturn. But again, it's just difficult to say anything really constructive or useful about him, because we don't have a time of birth for him. And maybe you do have a time of birth, but I don't know. And then we've got some female candidates. I mean, Annalena Baerbock, the foreign minister. I mean, I don't think she's leader of the Greens. She's not leader of the Greens. But I just wanted to point out one thing about Annalena Baerbock's chart. Remember, she's a Green. She is a neoconservative. She's a fanatical supporter of Ukraine and sending Ukraine as much weaponry as is possible. But she has her Mars at 1756 Capricorn. So Mars is going stationary at 1701 Cancer. And so in the wake of the election, she's got Mars opposition her Mars. And even though we don't have a time of birth for her, you can see that at the moment with Mars stationing opposition her Mars, there's a lot for her to be really angry about. She seems to be annoyed, and it's going to perhaps be quite a difficult time for her, and Mars may represent some of the men in her life as well. So it'd be interesting to see with Annalena Baerbock how that Mars opposition her Mars is going to work. Now, there are other women who are party leaders. So here is the horoscope for Sarah Wagenknecht. So Sarah Wagenknecht is head of she has her own party. I think it's called the Sarah Wagenknecht Party, or is it the Bund Sarah Wagenknecht? I don't know, something like that. And here's her chart. Don't have a time of birth for her. And she's under a bit of pressure from Mars as well, because, again, I don't have a time of birth, but she's got her Mercury at 1630 Cancer, so Mars is going stationary pretty close to her Mercury, and so she is under a certain amount of pressure there, and I suppose there's a lot perhaps for her to get annoyed about here. And I mean, I think in terms of the polls, she's right on the cusp of getting, whether or not she gets that 5%. I think that's whether or not her party is going to get that key 5%, and it obviously is stressful for her. And she what else? Anything else of interest going on with her chart? Possibly not. Again, I don't have a time of birth, so I think it's just that Mars conjunct her Mercury is something that we should be looking at. But the candidate that really might be impacted by all of this, I mean, who we should perhaps really look out for, given what we know from the polls anyway, is Alice Weidel. So she's co-head of the AfD, this right-wing party. I don't know how right-wing, because we have this right-wing, far-right. It's really difficult. The AfD's manifesto is in English online. I tried to sort of look through the manifesto, and it's a right-wing party. The manifesto is standard right-wing stuff. People say that it's a very dangerous, the AfD. Well, why is the AfD dangerous? Well, it's perhaps more of an ad hominem argument. You can say, well, there are some very dangerous people supporting the AfD who follow the AfD, therefore the AfD is a dangerous party. But I don't know. But she is the party leader who's getting most attention, and she's had, of course, meeting with Elon Musk, and she's had a meeting with J.D. Vance. And look at her Venus. Her Venus is at 1 degree Capricorn. And what's interesting is at the German federal elections, the midheaven, assuming my 8 a.m. opening time is right, set for Berlin, you've got 1 degree 39 Capricorn on the midheaven. So it could be that this election actually is about Alice Weidel, because remember, in the solstice chart, we had Venus on the midheaven. Which chart was it? It was the chart for the February the 3rd chart. We have Venus on the midheaven. So we've got 2 charts with Venus on the midheaven. We have Moon on the midheaven is at the time of the when polls open, set for Berlin. And so I'm thinking this is really talking about Alice Weidel. Alice Weidel is a woman who's getting prominence because of this election. And I'm feeling that, regardless of what the votes are, it does kind of look good for her. I mean, apparently it's impossible for her to win this election. It's impossible for her to become Chancellor. But that doesn't matter. It's about her prominence and what it means for her position. So I'm thinking it is all about Alice Weidel. That's my interpretation of this strong Venus. Venus suddenly becomes prominent. So maybe Alice Weidel will, do as well as she can do, and that may say something about the future. I mean, looking at see if there are any other transits. I'm only looking at transits because I don't have anything else. I don't have an ascendant for her. Okay, I could look at directions, but I mean, I'll probably be looking at her chart again next week when we see what the results of the elections are. But I just do think it's important, and this moon is pretty close to her Venus. And so those are a few thoughts on the German elections. I wanted to have one thought. Again, it's a flippant thought, maybe an offensive thought. But I was thinking about lunar returns, and who has their lunar return? And I read this book. I read this novel. It was apparently a very, very famous novel in Germany. It was written in 2013, and it was called Look Who's Back by Timur Vermes. And the premise of this book, it's sort of magical realism, and the premise is that around 2012 Hitler returns to life, as he was when he died, except he's healthy and he's 56 years old, and he just appears from nowhere in Berlin, and homeless, destitute, whatever. And then the question is, what happens? What would happen? That's your act of magic, and then the realism starts, and you actually see what actually would happen. It was a film and a book. The book is much better than the film, by the way. But and of course, what happens is that it's a kind of a comedy, it's being criticised, the book, but in the end. He gets a lot of attention. He becomes a media star. He becomes a YouTube star, and in the end, he gets back into politics. And that's what happens. But in terms of Look Who's Back, the moon is at 4 degrees 12 Capricorn. So that means that it's pretty close to Hitler's lunar return. So here is Hitler's chart, just to. So here's Hitler's chart. So Hitler was born of a Moon-Jupiter conjunction, and he had his moon at 6 degrees 38 Capricorn. So, I mean, you could say that something about Hitler, that lunar return, there's something resonating here, and it's all about that, maybe that Pluto feel. A lot of those charts that we saw had Pluto on the descendant, and so who are the Nazis? Who are the people trying to restrict people's freedom? I mean, if you are if you're into astrology and you're on the left in Germany, you would say, well, yeah, this election, we've got to watch out. We've got to watch out for the AfD. We don't want Hitler to return. The AfD, we could associating Hitler with the Nazis. That's one view. You could say that, but it may just be that Hitler's chart represents chaos and breakdown, and Hitler's moon is in the election chart. And if you actually take Hitler's lunar return, here's Hitler's lunar return, which takes place February the 23rd, 2025. So in the middle of the election campaign, we do have Hitler's lunar return. Of course, he would be very old at this stage, wouldn't he? He'd be 136, I think, something like that. And it's actually quite a powerful lunar return, isn't it? So the moon is exactly on the 7th house cusp, and so it does get prominence. And so what Hitler represents is breakdown, and one has to ask, who are the people restricting whose freedom? I mean, those on the left would say, well, of course it's people like the AfD, but there is an alternative view, which perhaps J.D. Vance was presenting when he gave his speech at the Munich Security Conference. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about Germany. My apologies for my ignorance, but I hope you found that video of some interest. If you did find it of interest, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description, and I will talk to you again very soon.